This is mostly for venting purposes, and this is all stuff I've talked about before, just another redundant experience in God's simulation, in the alien robot simulation. This is not real. None of this is real. I just want to vent a little bit. So I'm just talking to myself, just venting, It's about wokeness in dating, trying to date someone woke. And I could go into all the warning signs, right? All the little things that were said in text before we even had the phone call. I don't even think it's necessary to tell the full story. Just that she wanted to have a phone conversation. We talked on the phone for an hour and a half. And I politely disagreed with her on various subjects, right? And I know we can get into why were we on these subjects, and I'm probably stupid to be doing this, whatever, blah, 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 and I probably can't even disagree with all that. But, talking about abortion and racial things and men's rights and feminism and whatever, everything that you shouldn't be talking about, especially with somebody who is woke. And the first thing that I want to talk about is when you talk to someone that's of this woke variety in particular, which I guess woke in a lot of ways it can be a word that's now misused, what's woke, what's not woke, but when I'm using it, it's referring to a very specific kind of person. And what's so hard to resist is to let it affect your worldview, your view on humanity, and so on. Because it's not that these people don't really exist. It's not that the threat of what they can bring to society isn't real. But it doesn't mean that everyone who's anti-woke is automatically correct, or that they're not going to be wrong in other areas, or that the temptation to then really want to there's just such this temptation when you talk to someone who's so intolerable as a human and really treats you poorly in some sort of interaction, to develop some sense of resentment, whatever, that would push you towards wanting to be as far away from whatever that person is as possible, right? And this happens in all sorts of ways, of people who hate men, hate women, hate white people, hate black people, whatever it is, hate this religion, all kinds of hating for all kinds of different reasons, right? Whether it's things that people can control or that they can't control, but basically the generalizing and grouping people together and hating. And I think, you could view this as, so don't do this to woke people, right? That's a group, right? Is that a group? But generally woke people, they don't necessarily just say, oh, hi, I'm a woke person. What it really is, and the problem with it, and I don't want to say, it's not like everyone who has a leftist opinion on something is automatically this kind of person. But the trend that I'm not making up, that I've experienced so often, is so what happened in the conversation was, it's not that this person lacked intelligence or that we couldn't have some interesting conversations. They lack the ability to handle someone that disagrees with their worldview. Okay? She could not talk. She tried to. I guess she did last an hour and a half. But even when I didn't insult her or anything like that, I wasn't rude, I was respectful. I even told her, oh yeah, I agree with most of your points on this issue. I do disagree on this element of it, but I agree with a lot of your points. Ultimately, they can't take it, right? They will jump from one logical fallacy to the next, but ultimately, they will just demonize you and dismiss you as a person. And that's sort of their fallback. The fallback is, and what ultimately ended the conversation, she hung up on me, unmatched me on the dating app, blocked me, because I told her I disagreed with her, that it was time for people who aren't marginalized, according to her standards, right? So, basically, it's time essentially for white men, more or less she was saying it's time for white people or men or white men, whoever is not in the marginalized crowd, it's time for them to shut up. And it's time for the other voices to be elevated. Because basically throughout the conversation, you can't really have, your opinion on abortion, it can't really be valid. You can't really have any sort of, you can't utilize logic or philosophy or anything because you're not a woman, so you don't know a woman's experience, right? And it's just, it's too absurd and too obviously absurd. And unless she wants to think, if she believes that I'm a sociopath and I lack empathy, then she could just say, well, you don't have empathy. But actually, the only person in the conversation who literally said, she said, I don't really care about babies because I admit I'm not very motherly, or I don't know what the word she used, nurturing, something along those lines. The only person who indicated that they might have some degree of lack of empathy was her. But what I'm getting at is there is the ideology, right, that it's time for white people to be quiet. It's time for men to be quiet. It's time for straight white men to shut up. And then everything that goes along with that, right? There's a lot of things that we know goes along with that. For the most part, I don't think there's any changing that. And I think sometimes I talk to certain people like this, and they're not always like, they can be people who are relatively intelligent people. And so I always mistakenly think that as long as I remain calm, civil, I'm not disrespectful, I give credit where credit is due if there's some part of their worldview or the opposition to their worldview, but elements that they dislike, it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, even if you very respectfully and articulate well your points, they don't want to hear it. That's why ultimately we didn't end the conversation on a nice note or her just saying, we have a different worldview. She had to, after an hour and a half of talking, and I didn't say anything insulting. My last words that she hung up on me on was, I disagree with your opinion. That's literally what I said. I disagree with your opinion on this. She hung up in my face, unmatched me, blocked me. As if I was some piece of shit. Some nothing. And it's ironic because even earlier in the phone call, she had complained about how people message her on the dating apps and what they focus on, that they focus on sexual things. And we talked about how her bio literally is referencing to her sexual nature. It does, right? Her bio does. But regardless of that, we were talking about the fact that, people generally on these apps, they get sort of callous over time and they devalue each other and they treat people sort of as subhuman, and there's just a lot of disrespect and it sort of builds off each other. And then here it goes, right there. It doesn't matter even if you talk about it, right? If you point this out, it's ultimately she hangs up in my face. But that's because, in part, of her worldview that, she's proving a point, right? Yeah, it's time for men to shut up. So she's going to shut me up. She'd probably do more if she could. Maybe, who knows? Maybe she would, gotta be afraid. Gotta be afraid of how people, want to take you down for having a difference in opinion. But, I don't think she's going to do anything to me or whatever. But, there is that irony there, right? That I'm not someone who's going to do anything to anybody in any real way other than stating my opinions. But but I'll be treated like I'm off. You're a man, so you might be. I can't trust you. You might be scary, right? Anyway, I guess that's going off on a tangent. But what I really just wanted to get at here is you can't change them. It's like, it's like the sort of the stereotype of when women want to rescue men, you can't save him or whatever. You can't save probably most woke people, right? Because they really aren't open, generally, to debating, discussing. They can't handle a difference in opinion. Whereas I could actually tolerate someone that has, as long as I can express my opinions and we can both hear each other out. Even if I find it I would probably be able to still tolerate it, right? I could still deal with it and see if we could just still enjoy each other. Even if we just could enjoy conversation or friendship or whatever it is. But they can't handle it. And ultimately what's going on is, I think it's going to continue this thing where, like I said, I don't want to sort of take this anecdotal experience, even though I've had many of them, and you can definitely see it, right, in the culture in terms of if you look around just on the internet and depending on the news source or whatever. In truth, maybe the majority of the country still is somewhere in some sort of reasonable ability to have conversation or whatever. Maybe most people aren't extreme right or extreme left. I don't know how they determine the numbers and all that, whatever. Maybe someone has polling on this, that, and the other, and how they'd break it down in terms of how extreme has the country become in various ways, or who decides what's extreme. I know there's that whole thing. What does it mean to be really reasonable or in the middle, or is in the middle reasonable? All I can say is it doesn't really matter about, I'm not talking about who's in the middle or not. It's who is willing to even have a conversation where they can have their worldviews questioned, and that won't resort to, ultimately, your opinion it's not valid because of your skin color, because of your genitalia. And then, as always, there's just the clear irony there, right? The people who are saying, stop being sexist against women, stop being racist against people of this color, they've come to the conclusion, whether they consciously understand it or not, that one of the key components to their solution to these problems is being sexist, yes, I'm going to say it, towards men. Being racist, yes, even if they are white, and usually that is what they are, white, towards white people. The people who are people generally who seem the most bitter about white people are other white people. So, certainly people can be whatever. The point is, though, I guess I wanted to make this point to myself, is to remind myself, you can't change them. Because sometimes maybe there's a part of me that just finds it, I enjoy a little bit of a debate. I think it's like, we can, it used to be, this can be flirtatious, right? Ooh, it's so flirtatious. We have a difference in opinions. That can be hot and sexy. But no, it's the no fun zone. And it's kind of funny, that's what the left has become in a lot of ways too, is even outside of all this, it's the no fun zone, right? It's who are the ones that really were trying to, kind of censor comedy in a way, right? But I don't want to get too deep into that, but really it is this feeling, there is this, why do I have just this disconnect to them? There's so many reasons, and some of them I've tried to articulate here, but yeah, it's just this thing where they're more moral than you by default, right? Whether it's based on their demographics, based on whatever victim class they're a part of, or simply based on them, they have the right opinions. So you're scum, they're above you, they're smarter than you, they're more moral than you. Why? Because, look, they're on the right team, they've got the right opinions of the day, and it's not even up for discussion. And if you try to discuss it, and you try to discuss things just simply based on, it can be even emotional, or based on logic, a little bit of emotion, what you're feeling, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they are racist. They are sexist. And that's just the irony in all of it, right? They cannot respect you as a straight white man. You are scum. And that's just the way it is. And so if you're a straight white man and you want to mess around with woke women because you think they're sexy or fun, whatever, that's fine. Proceed at your own risk. And if you want to have a little fun, whatever, but you're not going to be able to change them. You're not going to be able to generally have intellectual discourse and just have different opinions. Ultimately, it can actually become a pretty dangerous thing, because ultimately they see themselves as victims. They see you as the oppressor, and in any interaction, you will end up being treated as the oppressor, and they will be the victim no matter what happens. And they will gaslight the fuck out of you if you continue with them.